What makes a photograph unforgettable? How do you create meaning and depth in photography, just like Joel Sternfeld did? He told stories using color and composition to add layers to his photographs. But here's the question: how do you actually create that kind of depth and meaning in your own photography? And that's exactly what we're hopefully going to achieve and learn through today's video and through seeing the work of Joel Sternfeld. I selected this book today. It's been on my shelf for a while. This is not one of his most well-known books, Walking the High Line, but it's actually a very important book to put my point across. It's an important book as well for the lessons and notes that we can take from it. And of course, it's an excellent book in terms of price point. So if you're interested, I'll leave the link in the description. And for now, let's dive into another video and see how we can create meaning and add depth to our images through the work or through the analysis of the work of Joan Sternfeld. Sternfeld is widely recognized for his pioneering use of color photography at a time when black and white was still considered the standard for serious artistic work, a similar role to that of Stephen Shore, which we've discussed in a recent video. Unlike many of his peers, he didn't start in black and white and then add color. He began serious photography practice directly with color materials in the early 1970s. His approach was deeply informed by the color theories of Johannes Itten and Josef Albers, whose ideas shaped Sternfeld's understanding of hue, harmony, and emotional resonance of color in visual storytelling. He once reflected by saying, quote, "A color photographer must choose a palette as painters would choose theirs," highlighting his belief that color is not a technical aspect but a fundamental artistic choice. And essentially, the theories that shaped this belief was Itten's theory based on contrasts and emotional impact, where he famously created a 12-part color wheel and identified 7 types of color contrasts, such as hue, light, dark, warm, cool, complementary, analogous, saturation, and extension. He believed colors have psychological effects and that their arrangement could evoke specific moods and energies in the viewer. Another theory that influenced Joel's work was Josef Albers' relativity of color, which essentially demonstrated that how a color appears is deeply influenced by its surroundings. Through his interaction of color studies, he showed that the same color can look different depending on adjacent colors and that color perception is always contextual and never absolute. Pivotal moment in Sternfeld's career came in 1978, however, when he was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship, which allowed him to purchase 2 things that would become essential for his most ambitious project: a Volkswagen camper and a large format 8x10 view camera. And with them, he embraced a multi-year journey across America that resulted in his landmark book, American Prospects, released in 1987. This book is widely regarded as a milestone in modern color photography, capturing the complexity of American landscapes and society. For this project, the photographer traveled across the country, documenting scenes where human development intersected with nature, whether through suburban sprawl, industrial sites, or rural communities. Which I would argue that is something that puts his work closer to that of Robert Adams, whose work we've seen and discussed here on the channel in terms of like adding silence to your photography. So if you're interested, I'll link that video somewhere. But these 2 photographers tend to actually try and portray the complexity of American landscape, especially through the coexistence of 2 very contrasting elements: the human existence, human presence, and the natural, untouched landscape, or perhaps the effects one has on the other and vice versa. One of his most famous images from this project was taken at McLean, Virginia in December 1978 and shows a firefighter buying pumpkins at a roadside stand while a house fire rages in the background. At first glance, the image seems surreal, but in reality, the fire was a training exercise which comes across as a great example of how Sternfeld uses irony and visual storytelling to challenge our perceptions and expectations. Another later project is Walking the High Line, which is the book I'm featuring throughout this video today. And in this project, Sternfeld documented the abandoned elevated railway in New York City before its transformation into the now famous park. His large format color photographs captured the eerie beauty of this unforgotten space where nature and industrial decay coexist. The series, according to him, was a meditation on history, urban change, and the passage of time, offering what he claimed to be a poetic and symbolic look at a place that was once central to the city's identity but had fallen into neglect. However, Sternfeld's body of work extends beyond these subjects. In the book On This Site, Landscape in Memoriam, he photographed locations of recent American tragedies, pairing images with text to create a powerful memorial and commentary on violence and memory. And in another project called Stranger Passing, he worked mainly with portraits taken over 15 years as the photographer traveled again across America. Unlike traditional portraits that focus on the famous or powerful, for instance, Sternfeld's subjects were everyday people, captured in their environments with dignity and curiosity. And this series functions as a visual survey of American life at the turn of the century, reflecting the diversity and individuality of its subjects, in my opinion, of course. So now that we know a little bit more about Joel Sternfeld and we know a little bit more about his projects, the question still lies in the video: how can we, take lessons from him in terms of creating more depth or meaning to our photos, or bring them into our photos? I actually noted 5 ways that he does this, and I'd start by saying that it's actually by democratizing the frame. It's literally about acknowledging that everything in your frame has the same weight, or can have the same weight, all the elements. And I'll explain exactly what I mean. Let's think about this concept: a democratic frame in which every element in the frame matters equally. For Sternfeld, nothing is accidental. Color, light, background, even the smallest detail is chosen with intention. This deliberate approach to composition transforms ordinary scenes into something more extraordinary, shall I say, which invites us, me and you, viewers, to look deeper and discover the stories hidden in plain sight. Another way I believe he achieves depth and meaning is through visual juxtapositions and the use of irony. And we'll conclude this by looking at a photograph taken near Vail, Colorado, where bright yellow aspen trees draw the eye before revealing rusting car carcasses beneath them. The contrast between the natural beauty and the human-made decay is what really creates a complex and more layered comment on the subject of American landscape. As Sternfeld himself has explained, quote, "All of my work has been about ideas of utopia and dystopia. I think that what gives America interest, it's many things all at once." His images, therefore, are never just about what's in front of the lens, but they're about the ideas, the emotions, and I would say the contradictions that lie beneath the surface. The use of color is as well another element of the narrative that is also worth mentioning. In Sternfeld's work, there is an undeniable understanding and careful use of selected colors. For instance, in his early New Orleans bar scenes, the interplay of reds and purples organizes the space and creates a mood, while his framing of the figures suggests individual stories within the image. His color choices are therefore never arbitrary per se, because he uses color to evoke emotion, humor, and empathy, making his images resonate more on an emotional level. It's also worth mentioning what I would say is our fourth tool, which is the openness of his photography to interpretation and the role ambiguity plays within his work. Sternfeld intentionally leaves his images open to interpretation, resisting the urge to provide too much context or explanation. This approach invites viewers to engage more deeply with the photograph, finding their own meaning and making the images more memorable and thought-provoking. As he once explained, quote, "No individual photograph explains anything. That's what makes photography such a wonderful and problematic medium. It is the photographer's job to get this medium to say what you need it to say." And last but not least, I would also say an interesting tool, and we've concluded something similar in the work of, or through the analysis of Susan Meisselis's work, and that is the use of text as a way to provide more context and a way to add more meaning and depth to the narrative the images are trying to portray. In projects like on this site, Landscape in Memoriam, the photographer pairs his work with short, factual texts that reveal the tragic stories of the places he's documenting. This combination makes the images even more resonant as the viewer is forced to confront the reality behind the picture. As the photographer noted, this technique, which is often overlooked by critics and even a target of criticism, because let's face it, photography is, at the end of the day, a visual way of communication. He still goes on to say that it's quite a practical and important tool. As for Sternfeld, words are just as important as the images he creates. He's passionate about the idea that photography and text can work together to create a more complete story, one that lingers in the mind long after the viewer has moved on. So for me and you, photographers, looking to add depth to our work, this can be something to consider, whether through captions, artist statements, and even short essays. And I'll give you a very practical example. I'm currently, as we speak, I'm developing another project of a dear friend of mine and photographer that I'm working with. And basically, the photos that I'm working with right now were taken in Cambodia in a hospital where Andreas was working at the time. And basically, what I'm also doing as a curator is I'm adding a context and I'm adding more meaning and depth through text. And I'm talking about things such as poverty and the concept of poverty and how that poverty is different from what we're seeing today. Today we see a poverty, or in our Western world, we see a poverty that is very much linked to financial struggles, whereas in the context of Cambodia, in the context of those photographs, poverty means so much more. It's, it means a lot more in terms of social status, in terms of the perception and a cultural perception of someone as well. It's super, super, super important to learn and understand about these photographs, because that's how we also add meaning, me as a curator in this case, and of course also what pain and suffering, the consequences of violence. So that's so important, and the building this as a way of adding more meaning and more power, and that ultimately elevates these images even more. So that's how I'm working on, for instance, and this is me working for someone else. It's not even me touching on my own work, because that would be completely different, and that would be obviously easier because I'm dealing with my own work. So with that being said, I hope this video was helpful in any way, shape, or form. I look forward to read your comments down below. And on that note, I will leave you, and I will hopefully be working in other videos to hit the channel next. So take care, stay safe, keep shooting, keep creating, keep learning photography, and I'm out. Peace.